Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake Biller and I break down a movie, discussing anything from mise-en-scène to scenes you missed. Today, Jake and I talk the power of perception as we discuss 1954's Rear Window. Jake, I know you've seen Rear Window before. On this rewatch, did you like it more? Did you like it less? What are your thoughts?
I always loved Rear Window. It's one of my favorite Hitchcock movies. I remember this is probably like the first Hitchcock movie I watched. My mom has always loved Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly, and so I remember her introducing this to me when I was, I'd say like early middle school, maybe like really when I started getting into like classic film and stuff. So this has always been a favorite of mine, and it holds up every time. For me, it's entertaining, it's interesting, the premise is really interesting to me. I remember so obviously this movie is about it has themes of voyeurism in it, and I remember my senior year of college in my film genres class, us talking about this movie and everyone bringing up the fact of like, wow, this is like really creepy, and it's like really like all these like themes of voyeurism, and just being like, what do you mean? Like, it's Jimmy Stewart, he can't be creepy, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah. This isn't Peeping Tom the movie.
but
Uh,
I mean, like, it's there, but it's like it takes such a like a, I don't want to say innocent, because like they definitely like discuss like the ethical questions of whether or not, you know, he should be staring in these people's back window and trying to decipher their life just because he's bored. Uh, but it's like, I don't know, it doesn't, at least for me, it doesn't feel creepy. Maybe because like Jimmy Stewart was like Tom Hanks before Tom Hanks was Tom Hanks, if that makes sense.
oh,
Like
100%.
he was like the clean cut, all American, everyman hero. So it's like, I don't know, like I have a hard time like seeing, or I have a hard time believing that he has um or that he's doing something wrong, I guess, if you could put it that way. But I think Hitchcock in Rear Window, and then in some of the other movies that Jimmy Stewart does with Hitchcock, thinking, oh my gosh, what am I thinking of? I can
He did Vertigo. He
Vertigo,
did
thank
Rope.
you.
Yeah.
Vertigo. He also kind of plays on, or he really kind of counters Jimmy Stewart's kind of clean cut image that he was known for playing at this time,
Yeah.
or during his career, really. So I think that's a really interesting take for him. Obviously, Grace Kelly is incredible um, in every way possible. One of the most beautiful women ever. I will say that. Uh, yeah, but no, I love this.
He
It's so
said, and
good.
that was it. That's not all of my commentary on is
That
that she's very attractive.
she is. She's a good actress. She's a great actress. I
Yeah, she's a
mean,
great
like,
actress, and she's good in this.
she's very good in this. So yeah, I know this is a movie you love to talk about. So
Yes, ooh, this may be my favorite Hitchcock film. This is something that I actually remember my dad loved this movie too. Um, and this was like one of the last conversations I had with him. We were talking film, and he talked about Rear Window. I was like, I didn't know you. I mean, I knew he liked movies and I knew he liked TV and watching it while he was working, but I didn't know he was. I mean, that was 1954. That was 9 years before he was even born. Is when this movie came out. So, um, I first saw this movie at Ball State, and I remember watching it and then thinking, oh, I got to go show Daniel, my roommate. I got to show Daniel this movie. And so I turn it on, and he guesses the whole freaking premise within 10 minutes. I was so mad. I was pissed. I was like, it took me like 45 minutes to figure out what was going on here, and you figured it out within 10 minutes. I was like, which is the most Daniel thing of all time. But um, I've seen this movie at least 5 times, and I think it is just so brilliant because it is it's the epitome of show don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
It's the epitome of show don't tell storytelling.
Yeah.
If we look at it from the pure premise, the pure idea behind it, it's just a guy looking out his window and kind of coming up and discovering this alleged murder. But at the same time, I think it is very relatable, not for the murder part, but for the, I mean, we all come and look at things and kind of put on our glasses, if you will, with any situation that comes about. Anything from looking at two people across the street and kind of guessing their story, to having a friend who doesn't show up for something, and then you're thinking, oh, well, this, and this happened. It all, we all are, we're intuitive creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are. So I think this really plays on that because it is so easy. I mean, this is like the ultimate satisfying conclusion for somebody trying to figure out what's going on by just looking.
Yeah,
I know
it's very much like this is just people watching gone wrong in a way.
This reminds me of, I was at a wedding recently, and I thought that, and not for anything bad, I just thought that two people were trying to find me at this wedding. Like I thought they'd seen me, or is like kind of trying to catch up. And I happened to avoid them, not on purpose, but it just it just happened that way. And so I was on the dance floor, and I saw them like walking around to where I had been sitting. And so I was with a couple of buddies, and I said, "Hey, they're looking for me." And they said, "No, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. They're not looking for you. You're ridiculous. Just calm down. Dance on the dance floor." I'm like, "Well, I mean, I can't really calm dance. How do you calm dance?" But turns out at the end of the night, they said, "Hey, we've been looking for you all night." And I said, "Hey, I was right. I was right." But this reminds me of that because it's so easy for us to spiral in our heads. But this whole movie is what if the spiral was actually what we were supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate it for that. But this movie thrives on not like us not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
That's up until the very end. We are questioning whether, LB Jeffries is correct or not.
Yeah.
And we see all the different characters kind of go through their different arcs of not believing him to believing him. And I just appreciate that they didn't give it away necessarily. Mm-hmm. I mean, upon rewatch, if you watch it, pretty soon after you've watched it the first time, you can kind of catch some of these things. But I just very much appreciate that they didn't kind of give it away. Like a lot of movies I feel like would, just to increase the tension or kind of build the pace. I mean, this is nice and slow. It builds upon itself, which I think for a modern audience, they may struggle with, but that I think is so important to why this movie is so successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's just from a narrative aspect, how we've confined our characters, really our main character, LB Jeffries is our point of access for the story. We're learning things just as he is. We're piecing it together in the same way he is. And we're faced with the same constraints he is, right? Because we don't leave his apartment either. No shot takes place with the camera outside that apartment, which I find really
one or two at the very end.
Okay,
when he's following.
Okay, yes, at the end.
But at that time, we've already discovered
the ruse is up. Yeah.
Yeah, the ruse is up. Yeah.
But the way that Hitchcock has like confined the audience into this like claustrophobic little New York apartment, and we almost have a similar sense of like stir craziness of like, you know, we want to know, we want to go see what's out there, but we're stuck, and so we have to rely on our other characters, Lisa and uh Stella. I almost said Thelma. That's Thelma Ritter's character. And Tom Doyle, the police officer. We're relying on them to go out and like try and track these things down. But like you pointed out, they don't always believe in this crazy what they perceive as crazy, twisted story that Jeff's dreamed up in his own head because he's bored. So I think it just narratively is really interesting. And the setup of like how everything is laid out just like around that courtyard, and how like we see so much of these people's lives without knowing them at all, which is really just the epitome of the story. And it just really
Right.
reinforces the point home of like how much can you learn about a person from just looking at them across the courtyard.
Yeah. I think, you know, I think cinematography, right, is the big thing we're going to be talking about today. And that's exactly, I mean, from the opening shot, which is very famous, or the opening scene, if you will,
Yeah.
where we learn a lot of things about a lot of characters with no dialogue,
Right.
with no exposition. All the exposition takes place through camera movement. And
Mm-hmm.
so the storyteller in this, and honestly, throughout the entire film, the main storyteller is the camera.
Mm-hmm.
The camera shows us what we need to see and nothing more. And sometimes the camera shows us what we doesn't show us what we need to see to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so we see that we learn about his accident. We learn about what he does for a living, what LB Jeffries does for a living. We learn all of that through the opening kind of shot, the pan across this shelf,
Mm-hmm.
learning about, okay, he's a great photographer that works for a magazine. We learn all of that,
Yeah.
not from exposition. It is reinforced by dialogue, but we learn all of that just by the shot.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously reminded of my favorite movie, Back to the Future, where the first opening, we learn about the entire movie
Yeah.
from that opening shot. And I think and I'd have to look at it again because I hadn't seen this movie in a while. So it's not one of those where it's almost like a rewatch. Because I kind of walked into it a little fresh.
Mm-hmm.
But even the camera positions, I think, emphasized critical moments in the story happening.
Okay.
You know, from like where the camera is moving, especially in the courtyard, corresponds or coincides with significant elements of the story taking place. But yeah, the camera work in this is chef's kiss.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just so cool because the lack of dialogue again feeds into the idea of, okay, are we taking this ball and running
Mm-hmm.
where we're not supposed to be, or are we kind of in tune with what the director's trying to say, what the story is trying to say? You know, it's telling us things without telling us things, and then we have to decide if we are making it up or not.
Right.
Which I mean, name another movie off the top of your head that does that. If you say the remake of Rear Window,
Did they remake this? I don't know.
yes, they did. They did.
Really
Yeah, I think they've remade it a couple of times.
interesting.
Yeah, one of
Huh.
them was with Vince Vaughn, if I'm not mistaken.
Huh.
Yeah, I ain't here for that. Sorry.
Yeah.
The
Interesting.
originals is the way to go for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm hard pressed right now to come up with something uh in that to put you in a similar situation right now. But no, you're exactly right. I mean, that first scene is just I'm a sucker for first scenes. Like, I think that's a really important part of the movie that gets overlooked a lot of times. So when it's really well done, I really appreciate it. Uh, and this is one of the top, if not
Oh,
like the top. Like, this is what you want to strive for. Because we see everything and it's all like it goes by in an instant, you know? Like the whole like opening sequence, I'm gonna generously say maybe 3 minutes.
yeah, I think yeah,
Say
I think three
maybe
minutes is good.
maybe 3 minutes till he starts having that phone call with his boss, till that first moment of dialogue. And so it's just there's so much we learn, and there's so much that we're constantly reminded of throughout the movie, and things that it builds upon. And I like the fact that we're introduced to the whole courtyard, right? It's not
Yeah.
just Thorwald. Like, we're not just set up with that. We're set up with the composer that lives in the top floor. We're set up with Miss Lonely Hearts, Miss Torso. We're set up with the newlywed couple, the lady that gardens with the dog. And so we meet all these characters, and we constantly like kind of check in on them throughout the movie.
Hmm.
And it's it seems insignificant until you sit down and realize the fact that the only reason that like they end up calling the police and probably saved Lisa's life is the fact that they were calling the police for one of the other neighbors.
Right.
They call the police because Miss Lonely Hearts, they think she's committing suicide. And by the time they get connected to the police, which like that takes forever.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, I know I'm jumping way to the end here, but like that takes forever.
Yeah, but
And
they show up so quickly.
I know, but
It's
like
like, dang, are you?
I think the arrival time is quicker than than the time it took them to connect to the police precinct.
Yeah, they're like UPD. Like they're just like they're just
There,
on it.
yeah. But like, I feel like that's such that can be such an overlooked element of the story. But the fact that like you have to like develop some of these other characters without even talking to them, you have to develop that so that way that we care when Miss Lonely Hearts tries to commit suicide, even though we Jeffries has never met her,
Right.
but he feels somehow invested in her story because he's been watching her for 7 weeks from across the courtyard, and he's concerned about her because he thinks that she's committed suicide. And so he calls 911 and then just so happens to then look back up and, oh, Thorwald's coming home and he's about to find Lisa, and maybe we should get the police over there.
Yeah. I mean, just this is also it's also diegetic.
Yeah. Even
Even
are
okay,
you
are you gonna say even the score is diegetic?
yes, it's all. Why do we
I
folks,
knew it.
we really do share a brain cell some days.
I knew it. I
Some
knew that's what
days
you're gonna say.
some days we both have lost that singular brain cell and can't
Right.
function, but some days like today we're both tugging at it. But no, the score, like, except for the opening credit music and the end credit music,
Is diegetic.
everything else is
Yeah.
diegetic. Which,
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with the term diegetic, it means everything actually happens within the story, right? The music we hear is actually music that our characters hear, right?
Right.
It's not
And
it's not
that is something that is incredibly rare.
Yeah.
There is not I don't know if there's an entire score that is diegetic. I don't think so. Obviously, stuff like Baby Driver or Guardians of the Galaxy, those are diegetic songs, right? The characters
Mhm.
actually can hear some of them, but not even all of that is. I think this is one of the only films that I can think of that has a completely diegetic score.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring it up is because that adds to um insecurity is not the right word. Uh, unsuredness. Is that a word? Unsuredness? I don't know. Uh,
Indecisiveness.
indecisiveness of the story, because okay, when you hear, I mean, I like to listen to movie scores, as most of us know, by the GOAT John Williams, and I'm reminded of in college. Again, I would go and I would listen to scores while I'm walking around campus, and I'd like to pretend I was the main character. Um, I can't believe I said that out loud. Um, but my point is that listening to that score impacted the way I was viewing things.
Mhm.
It was a way for me to pretend.
Yeah.
And so in this instance, it kind of makes us think, okay, well, is he pretending because he's listening to the score? He can kind of hear the music. Is the music kind of going along with it? But the music itself is so nonchalant's also not the right word. I'm just not coming up with the right words today. The music itself is not foreshadowing.
Right, because
It's just jazz.
it's the composer, his composer neighbor trying to write his tune, write a song.
Yeah.
Is basic, or like, he plays other things kind of like just to play them and like keep in practice, I think. But I find it so interesting because you talk about this question of, are we making this all up, or did Thorwald really kill his wife? That's a question that other characters struggle with, that Jeff struggles with, and then that we as the audience also struggle with throughout the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about how score is used, it's used as a non-dialogue way to convey emotion, right? To convey,
Okay.
or to elicit certain feelings, like before a big battle sequence you hear a heroic theme, or before like something bad's going to happen you hear a really eerie theme. The fact that like we can't take emotional cues from the score in this movie, I think really highlights the way that Jeff is not sure of what he's seeing, and he's not sure if he's right.
Interesting.
Because he
Okay.
can't, he's let his own emotions, he's let his boredom pull him into this whole narrative that he's made up of, like, oh, my neighbor killed his wife. But he can't go discover that for himself. And everyone around him at some point questions whether that's true, or he just made it up because he's bored. And so the fact that we as the audience don't get the satisfying like emotional or like story cues of a score, I think really highlights the instability of this movie.
Ooh,
The the
instability. That's a good
the
word.
the 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 indecisiveness, the
Uncertainty.
uncertainty. Thank you. That's the word. I can't find the words either.
Man, yeah.
This is
Thesaurus.com sponsor us.
this is the all the wrong words podcast today, apparently.
Yeah. Well, there was one word that I did want to talk about, which is lighting.
Okay.
The lighting in this movie is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the lighting also helps tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at some of the things I thought were most interesting is when Thorwald would smoke a cigar in the complete darkness, which is like the most sus thing of all time.
Ooh.
Like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
great. You're smoking a cigar, but then you turn off all the lights and you're just like looking,
Mm-hmm.
like you're just sitting there. I was like, do you have like a migraine and you can't have the lights on, but then why would you be smoking a
Take the
cigar?
edge off, man. Take the edge off.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he was certainly taking the edge off. But you see this overarching kind of idea of light and dark,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of parallels what LB Jeffrey knows. Jeffries knows certain things, and he kind of sees that in the dark. But when he kind of comes into the light, and let me give you some examples. So when we have these scenes that are lit properly,
Mm-hmm.
that's very comforting,
Yeah.
right? We've got the warm kind of glow, and so uh, Jeff can really be comfortable in not only his surroundings but what he thinks about Thorwald. Right,
Right.
when Thorwald is in the light, he knows exactly what he's doing, and so he can kind of infer things and be like, "Hey, I see him doing that." Right,
Mm-hmm.
there's that idea that he can actually see what's going on. But when he's in the darkness, or when Thorwald is in the darkness, he doesn't exactly know. So when he
Right.
pulls himself back from the light in those instances where Thorwald's maybe looking outside, he's embracing that idea of, okay, he can't see me because it's in darkness, so he doesn't know that I'm onto him.
Right. And I think, going off this well, going off this lighting motif here, I've really noticed like it's most of the lighting is supposed to be mimicking daylight, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you have this constant like there are times that it's full daylight and Jeff is comfortable looking out his window across at Thorwald in the full daylight. But then there are times when he feels he's self-conscious about what he's doing. He's self-conscious about the fact that he may be a peeping Tom and spying on these things. He has is this ethical question he starts to deal with that other people bring up to him about like, hey, this is a little weird, man. You're staring out your window at your neighbors because you're bored. Like this is kind of creepy. And so he pulls himself back into that darkness, like you were saying. He pulls himself back into shadow. And I think those moments kind of signify like his um his uneasiness as a character about whether he's right or wrong, or about whether what he's doing is morally right or wrong. And I
Right.
think that's paralleled with the fact that Thorwald, he doesn't do anything bad in the daylight, or he doesn't do
Yeah.
anything bad with the windows open. Like obviously, like you're not going to murder someone with the windows open, at least if you plan to murder someone. But like when he kills his wife and like cuts her up and takes her away, that happens on a rainy night, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
we're led to believe the moment that we think it happens is a rainy night, and so it's in the obscureness of night, in darkness, or he pulls all the blinds closed. So Thorwald, even though we don't see him, we know he's in darkness, and that's when he's cleaning everything up and getting rid of the evidence, or packing his wife's belongings to send off in that big trunk. And so it's like the the darkness signifies like wrong. Like I think it's very like light is good, dark is bad. And so the way that like we use shadow on about whether Jeff's comfortable being in the full light or having to pull back into the shadow, it signifies like a really kind of indecisiveness in his character about whether what he's doing is right or wrong, and how that connects him with Thorwald, about how Thorwald's bad actions he does in the dark, but we never see that because it's dark. That makes sense.
Yes. So, like, everything with the lighting, that's something that you may not notice at first, but it just kind of adds to this. And obviously, all of the decisions, just like we said with the music is diegetic. This is also diegetic in a way, right? The lighting comes from
Mm-hmm.
it is not manipulated by the director in a lot of ways. It all
Yeah.
has to do with natural lighting for the most part.
Yeah. But
For the
no,
most part.
I think this motif really like plays on like daylight and lack of daylight. And so I think it's really interesting. And it's so subtle because you just think of it like naturally, like as the sun in this movie.
Right.
I think that's really so interesting. I'm reminded, I can't remember what movie this is for, who said the quote, but the gist of it is they're lighting some scene, and the actor says, "Wait a minute, where's all this lighting come from? It's some dark scene and they're adding a lot of light. And the actor says, wait a minute, where's all this lighting come from? And the director says, the same place the music's coming from.
Right.
Which, like, but is that comment to go to say, like, you don't, if you have a good story purpose, you don't always need like a real world explanation for it. But this movie, like we just talked about, all the music is diegetic. So then it only makes sense that all our lighting feels diegetic.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's just so, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up, and it's obviously with me, I struggle to explain it exactly, right? Because this is kind of off the cuff. I really didn't do a lot of thinking on, okay, what does the lighting mean? But for you folks at home, when you watch a movie like this, looking at the lighting and the choices made, because there's so many choices that are made when making a film.
Mm-hmm.
But the choices that were made, especially with the lighting and the score, really help sell the narrative and really help place you as the viewer in the crippled shoes of Jimmy Stewart's LB Jeffries. The next thing I really
we're
wanted,
in the boot too.
Yeah. Didn't it say here lies like the crippled or like the broken bones of LB Jeffries on the, that was really, that was really funny. The next thing I really wanted to talk about were the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we can start with the main character, LB Jeffries. Pardon my French, but what an ass, especially in the beginning of this movie. You know, I mean, I've known people that have a severe case of I think I know it all. But what did I text you? I texted you specifically. I texted you like you were asleep when I watched this.
I took a nap.
So I've got like literally like a paragraph of different text messages.
All sent separately, mind you.
Yes. And but okay, I said I love that he's trying to defend some of the decisions and the way he's treating Grace Kelly's character as masking it as Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But in reality, he's too afraid because he really is in love with her.
Yeah.
So especially at the beginning of this movie, and this kind of carries through, and this is why there's that uncertainty with the murder, is because he comes off as a character that thinks he knows everything and he's wrong, or he's approaching it the wrong way, especially in the beginning. So that also adds to the uncertainty for the character, for us as the viewer, to think, okay, is he right about this, or is this just another one of his made up? And that's why I so relate to this character, is because I think things, I'm not a schizophrenic, but I do sometimes think things, or I infer things that aren't true.
Mm-hmm.
And so we start off with him kind of talking about his relationship with Lisa's character and how she obviously loves him,
mm-hmm.
but he's trying to protect her by saying, this isn't the life you want.
Yeah.
Which does not give her the agency to say which life she wants, but also is not true. And it's clear that he's just doing this because he's afraid of the commitment and is kind of second guessing himself, which is also interesting in the whole concept that this movie is all about second guessing.
Yeah.
Am I correct? I mean, I only see slivers
mm-hmm.
of what's going on. And while Thornwall looks incredibly sus, at the same time, there's no guarantee,
right?
Just like with his relationship with Lisa, that he's correct.
Right.
There's no guarantee that he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And so the brilliance of this movie is that there's so many layers of uncertainty that are built in from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Even the idea that you're a professional photographer and somehow you got like hit by a car. Shouldn't you know, as a professional photographer, to get out of the way? But also at the same time, I understand as somebody that likes to shoot that you kind of want the shot.
Yeah.
So like I kind of understand that.
You get caught up in the shot.
Yeah, you do get caught up in the shot until
It
the
catches up to you.
shot gets caught in you. Yeah, you know. Um, but the character
No.
we learn so much about,
Mm-hmm.
and just from the beginning, but he's
Yeah.
just such an ass.
No, I agree. And I was thinking about this when we were getting ready to record. Is this may be like one of Jimmy Stewart's most unlikable characters?
Yeah.
Because like there's really like no, like if you think like just looking at this character on paper, you're like, why should I care at all for this character? Why should I care at all what he thinks?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, or why should I root for him? I guess is the better question. And I alluded it to at the beginning of the podcast, but the fact that like Hitchcock seems to like it to take his like Jimmy Stewart's very like clean cut image and play with that, play with like audience's perception of who they think this actor is, because this was an era of a lot of typecasting. I mean, you think you see
Oh,
typecasting now,
for
like
sure.
you once you had success in one type of role, that was the role you played for the rest of your career. And if you tried to break that, a lot of times you were punished by the studios and or by audiences. People didn't like seeing people step outside that two-dimensional archetypal character that they'd been used to seeing you play. So I think it's so interesting the way that Hitchcock likes to take Jimmy Stewart. You see it in this movie especially, and really kind of make him an unlikable character, relying on the fact that people will like him anyways because it's Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah, that's freaking bold.
Yeah, which
That's
like
freaking bold.
Hitchcock as a filmmaker, I have a lot of interesting opinions about, because he was terrible to actors. Like
Yeah, he
he
called them
was,
cattle.
yeah, he said
He said, "Move into frame."
he was quoted as saying that actors were like cattle, and then someone doing a press interview quoted that back to him. He said, "No, no, no, I didn't mean to, I never said they were cattle. I said they were like cattle, and you treat them like cattle." Like the man just between him and John Ford, like why people wanted to act in movies at all at that
Right.
time, like it's just astonishing. But anyways, like for having seeming to be so like callous towards the actors you work with, I feel like he really understood. Um, he understood not just them as actors, but he understood like how audiences would view these people.
Because okay, let's do a little exercise, right?
Yeah.
Um, who is another like famous kind of leading man of that era? John
Very,
Wayne.
okay, John Wayne.
And we'll
Okay.
start with John Wayne.
Okay.
Um, you would believe that there probably is a murder. Just by the way in which, I mean, the kind of movies John Wayne was in, the kind of character that he would play,
Yeah.
you one would be a lot more, it'd be a lot more believable, the ash holelessness. Once again, I know I'm speaking a lot of French today, but you would believe, you would kind of believe that more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're in our minds placing John Wayne in the kind of boot of Jimmy Stewart, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
Or you had another name.
Or well, to go off the John Wayne thing, I think also audiences would struggle seeing John Wayne laid up in a cast in a wheelchair.
Yeah, because
Because he
that's
was
not his
very,
MO.
one, I think he would have struggled in that role because he's such a physical actor, and like his walk, the way he carried himself was so integral to his characters. But I think audiences too would really kind of recoil from seeing this big action hero laid up in a wheelchair for a whole movie. But no, I was also going to say, I thought you were asking me to name an actor from another leading man for the time. So I was going to say, I thought of Cary Grant.
I also thought of Cary Grant.
Another
Yeah.
Hitchcock.
Regular.
Yeah, but it would be like having Cary Grant play play a villain, I think.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, or
he doesn't always play like the most like there's some like, I don't want to say darkness there, but there's some like kind of like a uh there's definitely a womanizer quality to a lot of his characters, which
yes.
back then would have been more easily glossed over than viewing it now. But at the same time, it's not, the up and up, most respectable, clean cut person like Cary Grant then can't go play Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right?
Right.
There's a different flavor there. But like to have Cary Grant play a villain, you would want to believe that Cary Grant is the good guy because that's what you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
You would want to believe that Cary Grant's going to get the girl because that's what you've seen.
Right.
And so to take that perception at this time in Hollywood and twist that or kind of riff off that, I think is really, really interesting for Hitchcock to do.
Yeah. So it's just so interesting, even who he casts.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of moving down the line, talking about Lisa Grace Kelly.
What a woman!
She's shut up.
The woman, she literally became a princess.
Princess. That is yeah.
Like that makes
pretty
so
elite.
much sense. That makes so
Yeah,
much
she
sense.
quite literally was the Princess Bride. But she does has a commanding performance.
Oh yeah.
As somebody that she was not two-dimensional.
No.
As a character. I mean, she really challenged. She really was kind of the antithesis in a way of Jimmy Stewart's character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she really challenged him to kind of get out of his rut.
Yeah.
In a lot of senses. From the fact that she loved him.
Yeah.
And was willing to put up with him kind of being a jerk. And she kind of knew, like, at the end of the day, he's just kind of insecure.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really appreciated her performance. I thought it was really well done. And I love it's so clear that she loves him.
Yeah.
From even going along with it at the beginning to then actually being like, oh wait.
Yeah.
Maybe he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really liked her performance.
No, she's phenomenal. And like the amount of like, she's obviously this is 1954, so you can't be like too sexy, but like is very like sexy in a way that like passed the censors.
Yeah.
It just like was able, okay, put it this way, with, shall we say, studio / societal constraints of how we thought women should behave on screen, she was able to give a very sexy performance, I thought, in just like, but in such a classy, elegant way. Like she was able to like make it clear that like she was trying to like she was in love with Jeff and trying to, like, some would say she was how do I want to use this terrible term, riz. She was using her riz, a term you love and I hate.
I texted you quite literally, LB got so much riz that you might say he is irresistible, because she kept coming back. Like they both had they both had riz. They both had riz.
Yes. Whatever riz means, they both have it. I can't believe I just said that. But anyways, no, she's like, she has this just like sensational quality about her. She's like, I don't know, like you the whole movie you're watching it and you're like, how can you not believe that Jeff's in love with her? Because who wouldn't be in love with this woman? But at the same time, I think that's part of the reason that she is in love with Jeff is she's probably, maybe making a narrative leap here, but this is probably a character who's used to having men, especially wealthy and powerful men, fawn all over her and try, try and woo her, if you will. So the fact that she's encountered a man that she's interested in that is not interested back in her, I think she almost takes as a challenge.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I
And
think that's
yeah.
that's such an interesting layer to their relationship. That blooms and blossoms. And as much as Jeff wants to deny it, he is in love with her.
Well, because honestly, I think as an audience member, that dynamic is kind of just as interesting as the did that guy did Thornwall kill her?
I think it's what carries the movie in the early parts.
Yes,
That's why you watch, because we're left with just such like little hints that Jeff even only kind of like passively is pursuing. Like it's not
because
really
I
till
mean,
like
like they're making out, they're like making out, and he's like, "So, do you really think do you what would you do with a saw?" You know, that's my Jimmy Stewart. That wasn't half bad. Um, Lisa,
Lisa,
Riz.
what would a man do with a saw? And
But they're like
my
making
mother's
out, and
gonna yell at
he's
me for my Jimmy Stewart impersonation because she hates when I do a Jimmy Stewart impersonation. That was for you, Mom. That was for you.
and he literally kind of stops and is like, "So, what do you think about this?" And that really, I think that helps the audience in saying, okay, if he's not interested in Grace Kelly, right, and he's more interested in somebody who is pining after him
Yeah.
and is more interested in this murder, there's got to be something to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that actually helps. You're right, especially in the beginning where we're kind of introduced to this idea that, I mean, if he's really fixated on this and not Grace Kelly quite literally in his lap, there's something to it.
Yeah.
But the other character I wanted to talk about is Stella.
I love Stella.
Stella is so out of pocket. She's so funny. In this, and she's smart, and I think that it really shows how well written this movie is. Mm-hmm. Just in the way in which she kind of delivers lines, but also there's a certain scene where, and this was like the one thing I wrote down. I said the scene where Stella kind of oh crap, now I can't even, oh, here we go. This is how you read. I like can't even read my own handwriting. The scene where Stella buys in and LB is eating shows just how great Jimmy and Alfred are together. So she really, because she's talking about, oh, well, do you think, I mean, you better get that trunk out of there soon or else it's going to start to leak right as he's drinking. He goes, I don't really want to drink. Or she goes, so how do you think he killed, like cut up the body as he's cutting up the egg? And he's like, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's so subtle, but she's just such a great addition that really emphasizes how great Hitchcock and Stewart are together. Mm-hmm. But she also, she again is another female character that really challenges LB Jeffries and kind of making him say, okay, you've got this idea, but you got to prove it. Mm-hmm. You can't just say, oh, well, he killed him and I think this is why. It's like, you got to prove it to me. And then, but when she buys in, that also helps the audience say, okay, wait, there's something going on here. Yeah. Because you've got both Grace Kelly's character and Stella's character bought in. Yeah. And they're both two people that have kind of been challenging LB Jeffries' perception.
Yeah. There are two moments that come to mind right now when thinking about Stella's character and what she means to this story. Towards the beginning, I think it's the scene where she's giving Jeff a massage in his apartment, and she makes the comment about something bad's gonna happen, and Jeff's like, oh, Stella, what do you mean? And you're just superstitious. And she's like, no, I know these things. And she goes into the whole story about how she, she's obviously like a insurance company nurse or whatever.
Yeah,
she takes care of people, not in like a
mob not
sense.
not in a Thornwall sense.
But anyways,
yeah.
She talks about right before the stock market crash, having to treat the executive at General Motors for, I believe it's a stomach ulcer, and she's like, "Now, what does an executive at General Motors have to be worried about?" And then the stock market crash happens, and
Sure enough.
that's to show that Stella has kind of almost a sixth sense about these things. She's been around the block enough times that she knows when something seems off, even just in a passing glance. So really, that almost like, because I think that scene happens before we get like before we really start catching on to the fact that Thorwald's acting suspicious, or that something suspicious is happening over there. Like, she is the first one, I think, to introduce the idea of like something something ain't all right here. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that really almost like, I think maybe is Jeff's like impetus as a character of like sending him on this, like, it puts the question in his head. She plants the seed of like something's not going right in that apartment across the way.
Hmm.
And Jeff starts paying attention then and starts noticing things. And he kind of runs with it. But Stella's really kind of like the incitement for Jeff's character and into looking into Thorwald. So I think that's really interesting for her as a character. And also, um, it's a later scene when Lisa and Jeff and Thelma are all watching Thorwald's apartment. They're watching for him to do something. I think he maybe. I'm pretty sure it's the scene when he's washing down the walls in the bathroom, and
Yeah.
he's like, and she says the comment of like, "Oh, that must be where he cut her up because that's the only place that he could dispose of all the blood." And Lisa, like, it's like, "Stella, that's a terrible thing to say," but she's like, "What? That's what we're all thinking." And like, that is Stella. Stella's the one that's not afraid to say what everyone else is thinking, but like as
Right.
a character device is like able to then like verbalize some of these thoughts.
That's a good point. That's a
And
really good
so
point.
I think as a narrative device, she's really interesting. And also, like, Thelma Ritter just plays the character to perfection, I think.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But those are some of the kind of the main players,
Yeah.
some of the main characters, and some insights into it. And once again, we really hope for you folks at home, you see, okay, we're breaking down, and you probably watched this movie and said, oh well, like this is a great movie. But it's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this a great movie? And so, touching on the lighting, touching on the diegetic score, touching on these characters and the decisions that the filmmakers made in order to have this movie work so
Yeah.
well, is something that we try and convey to you. But now is the time where we're going to go into our rosebud and thorn. As always, Jake, I'm passing it off to you first. What are your rosebud and thorn for Rear Window?
So roses, I got three. I've got Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly, and Thelma Ritter. That trio is just, they're so good throughout the whole movie. They're exciting to watch even through maybe some of the slower parts of the movie. It's interesting to just hear them talk. And so I think they're really, they carry the movie. Um, I think each of them shines in their own way. Like, we just really got into breaking down all three of those characters, so I won't rehash all of that. But it's just such, they're so well crafted characters, and then you put through really, really good actors in those characters, and they just excel in this movie and make the whole movie. So three of my roses are going to go to all three of them. Buds, I have two.
Okay.
I, I'm a real stickler about editing, and I have a hard time, as much as I am the classics nerds, I have a hard time with a lot of classics because the editing is not always the most crisp. I almost said
Okay. Yeah.
crispiest. That's a weird word.
We got some crispy editing.
Yeah, this is not crispy,
It ain't
because
crispy.
it defaults to like the ending of a scene, we fade to black
I knew you were going to
always,
mention that. Mm-hmm.
always, and it bugs me because it's I don't know. It's just it feels to me it's a missed opportunity. I love
Yeah.
the way that I love finding fun ways to transition between scene to scene. I think that's one of the hardest things to do in a film edit, maybe, is finding ways to cut between scenes without just doing a fade, finding
Mm.
a reason to do something besides just a fade. or a dip to black like this. And so I think it's a missed opportunity here in this movie. So that's a bud. And then I'm also going to say the pace. It's just a little too slow for me. I think this could have been like it's a 2-hour movie. I think it could have been hour and a half, hour 45 easily, and had a little more zip to it. So I would like to see the pace increased a little more. And then the thorn has to be that fall at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
so bad. I remember from the first time watching this movie with my mom being like, wow, this is a really good movie. And then he falls and I'm like, oh, this is so cheesy. Like, this is
That was
like
rough. Yeah.
just can of spray cheese. It's so fake. But like between the like obvious like mannequin that they have falling and the way that like you can tell that Hitchcock didn't think things were moving fast enough and he sped up some of the footage.
Yeah.
You can tell that it's now, this is me being nitpicky and without getting too much in the weeds there. I can tell he sped up the footage that was originally captured at a lower frame rate because the movement's too clean. There's no motion blur in when these characters are running. And so it feels off to me watching this, at least. And I think a lot of people would probably think it's off. So that bugs me, and the like fake. Yes, I know it's 1954, but
yeah.
It that scene makes it feel especially of its time. So that is my thorn. There is the fall.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you on that, because I don't have any buds. I just have roses in that thorn. To start off with that thorn, kind of going off what you said, I really struggle with that end scene. And it had more to do like the fact that they kind of used like blue screen kind of and like rotoscoped him in. It was like a really weird way.
Yeah.
That it was very obvious that Jimmy Stewart didn't actually fall.
Yeah.
It was like they took a still frame of him kind of falling and then they just shrunk it in like I don't know. It just that
like
really took me out of it.
They took a frame of him hanging off, taped it onto a brick, and dropped the brick.
Yeah. And that and then also at the beginning when he's on the phone with his boss and there's the helicopter that is kind of added in. That just didn't work for me. And so especially, like I understand the limitations of the time and trying to tell the story. But at the same time, it did take me out. It did take me out. So that's my thorn. I would have to say my rose was Jimmy Stewart. I'm a huge Jimmy Stewart fan. But I think he's so good in this.
Yeah.
He's so good in this because he really has to use his acting chops. I mean, there's not a lot other than him that goes on in the movie. You know, like we focus on him a lot. So I really appreciated that. Yeah, I think those are my also I'll give another rose to Grace Kelly. I know we talked at length about her, but I just really appreciated the performance. I thought it was a really, really strong performance. So those are my couple of roses and my thorn. But now we move on to who we think we are. Jake, who do you think I am?
All right. You are. I have dubbed him the piano man, the guy in the apartment. I point to the right. He's off to the right.
Man.
The composer that's struggling to write the score. I first thought of you when he is stress cleaning his apartment. And I say stress cleaning because he keeps like mopping around his piano and then coming back and like punching out a few notes and like he can't get it. And so he goes back to cleaning, but then he goes back to the piano. And I know you are a stress cleaner. So that
I am. And I also do clean in shorts.
Yes.
Like he literally only had like shorts on.
Yeah.
And yeah,
That's how you clean.
that
Um,
is how you clean.
but he's also obviously he's a creative person. He's writing music for a living. So that reminded me of you. And he's also he has the big party, and so he likes to entertain. And you are an entertainer.
I do like to entertain. Um, I don't really entertain in the basement, but I do like to entertain when I can, for sure. I think for me, you are very clearly Detective Doyle, um, because uh, you have to put up with me a lot. And I really saw myself as LB Jeffries, and so Detective Doyle does a great job of kind of entertaining him a little bit, but then also bringing him back down to reality. Um, and I feel like you do that all the time with me. Because I'd be like, oh well, she didn't text me, so that means that she doesn't like me, and therefore, ergo, I kind of spiral in it. And Jake's like, what if she's busy? Well, no, she can't be busy. That's not possible. You see, because if she was busy, and there are occasions where I am right
Yes.
about these things, but there are also occasions where I'm wrong, and she was in fact busy. So I think that you just exist like that character and you were like synonymous with me. So like from the very beginning when he walked in and Jeff was spouting on and he's like, but maybe not. Maybe not murder that you think happened because you're just staring outside of a window and have been for the past 7 weeks. Maybe not. So I just really I don't know. I just put you two together. So that's who I think you are. Now we're gonna go into some final thoughts. Jake, what are your final thoughts on Rear Window?
Final thoughts. I've always loved this movie. This rewatch was no different for me. It's great. A lot of good performances in here. It's a really well crafted story, a story that has a lot of layers to it that you don't necessarily see on a first watch. For all those people out there watching this, I would encourage you to give it a watch, especially if you like mysteries or you like Hitchcock. Maybe you're familiar with some of Hitchcock's work. Definitely watch this. And I would also encourage you, if you've seen this before and are watching this episode, go back and rewatch it again. See if you can pull out some of these layers that we've kind of broken down in this podcast. Because I think it's been a really good discussion, and we want to hear your thoughts as well. What do you think about some of these layers? What are things that jumped out to you? So yeah, it's a good movie. It's always mysteries, I think, have a hard time standing up on a rewatch. So the fact that this stands up so well every time I watch it, I think really just is a testament how good a movie it is.
Yeah, going off of that, that's what I was going to say as well. Especially there's this sweet spot uh as a movie viewer where you've seen a movie once, and especially with mysteries, you've seen a movie or thrillers, you've seen a movie once, and there's this sweet spot where you remember, okay, it was really good, but I don't exactly remember everything that happened. But I still remember that the movie exists and that I liked it a lot. And then you go back and watch it again, and it's almost like you're watching it with a fresh set of eyes, because you don't necessarily always remember all the things that happen. And I think sometimes we as film fans think, oh, well, I've seen it already. I know it's a mystery. I know the very end. But the things that kind of lead up to it and the way in which the story is carried out are things that we don't always remember. And so the things we talked about today are elements to the story that you may not have remembered. And so it's always important to remember. I've said remember like 5 times in the last sentence, but it's always important to remember that when you're watching something, you're going to have a different experience every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a movie that is a perfect example of a thriller or a mystery film that is worth a rewatch.
Yeah.
Some aren't, but this one is definitely one that is worth a rewatch. So highly recommend that you see it. It is spectacular and definitely worth the watch. But the question is for you folks: what did you think of Rear Window? Had you seen it before? Had you not? Was this your second time? Did you catch some of the things we were talking about? Let us know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. Make sure to hit that like button and ring that bell with the subscribe button that you hit to make sure to get all notifications on upcoming content. Jake and I obviously have plenty more things to discuss in the coming weeks. Make sure to follow us on social media. Follow the Cinefile, Jake, and myself on Instagram. And you can also follow us. I don't know why I did like that, but you can follow us on Threads as well. We are also on Twitter. Jake is on Twitter, and Cinefile is I am not. But I am on Threads. I've posted 0 threads, because you know what they say about loose threads. So I know, so dumb. But for Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.